Hey,
Thank you
Mr.
for
Rollins,
meeting with
or
me.
Congressman Rollins.
Yeah.
Please.
Mr. Rollins is fine.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. Well, it's a pleasure to have you back here. You're obviously very distinguished and well respected, and we're lucky to have your
Pleasure to take the time.
have your work. So, Congressman, I think we'll just dive right into it.
Okay.
And the first, very most important question is, how are you doing?
I'm good. It's a little nerving. I feel
Yeah.
like any moment there's going to be this huge breaking news story, but
Yeah. But you're used to pressure. So
I am. So I'm not sweating under it.
That's good. But yeah, and we'll do our best to help you today. We have we've done a lot of research, and I feel good about the
Good.
options we have. But I just want to go over a couple things, and I know we talked about this at our previous meeting. I want to talk about confidentiality for a minute.
Okay.
And I also want to talk to you about another aspect of this, which I'll start with, which is candid advice. So I don't want you to be thrown off if it looks like I'm giving advice that's not traditionally considered legal.
Okay.
So
All right.
I'm going to offer a perspective on moral issues, political issues, ethical issues, and not strictly the law, although trust me, there's plenty of legal matter we'll be getting into too. But as far as confidentiality goes, I want to remind you that anything you say here is confidential between you and myself. I would like you also to know that I have an obligation to protect communications that we send between each other, or that I gain with other individuals on this matter relating to you. So, for example, today we're going to talk about what's called a paternity test, and the possibility of getting one of these. I will need your express permission to do so, to sort of initiate this conduct, but also any communication between us and them. I have a reasonable expectation of protecting that information for you, and I have all intents of doing so.
So whoever you give my hair or whatever to,
exactly,
they won't publish that. Okay.
Exactly, and I'll make sure that when they only communicate with either myself or you as we sort of discuss. But yeah, so the first thing that I want to do after discussing that is talk to you about the system we're going to use today to figure out what option's best for you. So one thing I like to do with clients is I like to show them very specifically the things that are important to them as I understand them, and to give you the opportunity while we talk to sort of expand on that. So what I have here are a number of note cards, and I've written down a number of goals, as you can see. So we have secrecy of child's existence. We have knowing what Beck's relation to you is. We have making substantial income as a goal. We have continuing in politics.
Me making substantial or Beck?
That would be you making substantial income.
Just making sure.
Sure. Yeah, of course. So, let's see. We'll get back to that in a minute. I'm going to write that down because, of course, Beck is kind of at the center of this. So, and if you have any thoughts on goals that you would like to make towards Beck, you can certainly write those down too. These are just the ones that I've come up with. Maintaining the inheritance from Aunt Emily. And then being a parent. I know the last time we talked, we discussed a little bit about some of the aspects of doing so. But I have a number of blank cards. If you need more, we can make more and get more. And here's a pen for you.
If something comes or pops in my head,
Perfect.
I'll jot it down.
So I'm just going to dive right into it. This is going to be a really participatory sort of discussion. If you have anything to contribute at any point, please do. So I'm going to give you some questions kind of to shape some more information that I'll need from you. And we'll see where we go. So the first thing I have to ask is, since the last time we met, have you had any contact with Mr. Beck?
I haven't.
Okay, you haven't heard from him, nothing more?
No.
Okay. Fair enough. So the last time you talked with him was when you guys met and he came to D.C.
Yeah, and we got to know each other a little bit.
Got it. I don't suppose you've had any contact with the parent, the other?
No, I've been trying to think of a way to contact them, but I haven't heard from them.
Got it. And you can't remember where they're from? Any details from when you guys were on vacation together? Well, not together, but when you met.
No, I can't.
That's okay. Yeah. It's always good just to, if anything just pops in your head about Beck, about your meeting with him, or even about that meeting 19 years ago, it just feel free to contribute. Anything could be important. And we'll see. But have you had any thoughts, and this is going to really be a crux of today, about your feelings about being a parent. I know that in your political stance, you say you have a very strong intuition and deference for family values. And I'm wondering if you've given any more thought about the role that if Beck is your child, that you'd want to take in his life.
I guess that depends on what he wants.
Okay.
Because I know I'm afraid of the aftermath of this controversy being released, both with my aunt and with my career.
General,
yeah. So if there's a way we could somehow get a relationship without ruining my career or my inheritance, then it would be nice to get to know him more.
Yeah,
but I mean, he seems to really love his adopted parents, so
yeah.
So he has a good family.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I'd want to express today is that consider that, of course, he's going to have a family background, and we should be happy that he's had such a positive upbringing. And we still have to wonder what role you can play in his life in the event that he is your child, and that you both, if he wants that relationship and you do too, what role having a happy home life with his adoptive parents and with his biological father is something to consider.
Okay. I think I have to correct myself. When you said 19 years ago, I did speak with the mother when she was pregnant and having Beck. I flew her out to Chicago.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And paid for the medical expenses. I wasn't there when she was in the hospital, but we both signed the adoption papers, and that was it.
Okay, so that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad that that's been corresponded. I've been working on the theory that we would be mostly regarding Illinois law in terms of the adoption, and that does seem to correspond to what you're saying. So that's really good information. Okay. Thanks, Congressman. Let's see. So I guess I want to go back to your discussion with Mr. Beck when you were nice enough to fly him down, kind of meet him, get to know him. I know that there's only a slight resemblance between the two of you, but I'm wondering, did you notice anything in his mannerisms, any details about that he talked about that either seemed peculiar or that seemed really that they lent to you the ability to see more about him? I'm just curious what you've been able to garner.
No, nothing more than we discussed.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, if I saw him, I wouldn't think it unless I was looking for it.
Right, exactly. It's not a striking resemblance.
Yes.
But do you notice a resemblance with the mother at all?
I don't really remember what she looks like too well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to say. Yeah.
The years fly by.
Yeah, especially without Facebook and stuff.
Yeah, most definitely.
There was nothing back then.
So I guess the one other thing I want to know a little bit more about is tell me a little bit about on Emily. Is she shares your political views in terms of family values?
She does. Right? Okay. She does. She's conservative, but open-minded, I guess, is the...
Okay. I think one thing that strikes me, and I know it was a concern of yours in terms of the inheritance, was that it's a big fortune. It's a lot of... She obviously cares very deeply about you, and she has a lot of respect for the work you've done so far. So I just want to make sure that when we're determining goals and sort of how to proceed, that we weigh that too, because she might be conservative, but like you said, she's somewhat open, and she obviously has gone a number of years being very interested in you and involved. So I just don't want that to be underplayed either. Okay. And we'll have to weigh that accordingly, and you know better and can contribute to that discussion. But okay, so I think that does a good job in terms of filling in some of the blanks for me and just kind of rehashing some of the facts to get us back to just about an equal understanding of where we're at. So what I want to do now is go through the issues as I've been able to tell from the information I've had. Okay. And we'll go from there. After this, we'll discuss the different goals you have. We'll try to rank them. Okay. And if you have any that you want to contribute, feel free to. Okay. So first I want to talk about adoption, parenting, and child support. So first and foremost, again, we're both going to try to be very candid in this discussion, and I'm going to just try to contribute as much perspective on every aspect of the decision as I can.
In my line of work, I respect bluntness.
Yes, that's good. That's, it's tough to get stuff done if you're not going to be straightforward. And I really appreciate you saying that. All right, so first off, some research that I've done into Mr. Beck. I want you to know that as far as I can tell, his story checks out. As far as school goes, he did graduate from high school. Both his parents do work in the professions that he indicated. His mother is a manager at a grocery store, and his father's a school teacher. Again, he graduated high school. He has no arrest record, which is good. But if he was a juvenile and he had any arrests, we wouldn't be able to tell because that file's sealed. But as far as we can tell, he's fine. The part that I'm a little concerned about and I'm a little skeptical of is that a friend showed him his file and was able to give him the information to find you. The only reason I say that's suspect is because it's illegal to do that, and someone in that position is obligated not to do so. So there are a couple ways that he could have found out that I'd like to talk about, but they're still somewhat improbable. So it's just something to be aware of. Okay. So in Illinois, it's a closed file state, which again just means nobody's supposed to be seeing these. There are some exceptions, however. An individual, a child, adopted child, can approach the court and initiate an action for essentially revealing the closed files of them. There's no record of that, to the best of my knowledge, that he's conducted so. They need good cause to do so. In this case, he has family that's providing for him, and it seems that
if he had done that, would they have notified me?
They should have.
Okay.
And because, but I'll actually get into the way that they would do so. So in Illinois, if an adopted child wants to get into contact with you and wants to open that file, they're going to reach out and try to get what's called from the court, a confidential intermediary. So this is someone who would essentially reach out to you and ask if you were interested in reaching out to them. And obviously this is, there's certain policies for the state that this advances, which is it maintains the secrecy on both sides of identity in case either person wants to remain anonymous. So, and that obviously didn't happen here. And to be honest, from the research I've done, Beck shouldn't have been able to get a confidential intermediary because he's only 19 and you have to be 21 to be able to approach the court. However, I would like to say that you as the parent could approach the court as well to seek this kind of confidential intermediary to sort of verify that everything's sort of hunky-dory, open up the file and make sure that everything matches up in terms of the record. So that's an option that we can utilize. Now, to move on in terms of adoption, or I want to move from adoption into child support. So generally adoption ends most obligations for child support. There are some exceptions, and the one exception that exists in Illinois is education. You indicated that you were considering the idea of paying for college education. Case law in the state of Illinois has indicated that biological parents, are not obligated to pay for college education expenses.
Higher education.
Exactly. So just the primary education, and that's his primary education is finished. So I want you to be aware that if you're still considering paying for college, doing so would be completely of your own volition and would be a sign of affection. It would be, there's no legal obligation to. Now, that sort of serves as a good segue into one thought that I had in terms of our discussion the last time we met, which was I'm wondering sort of what alternate roles, what sort of roles a parent can play in a child's life and what you would be interested in doing so. So, for example, one aspect that I think you have a very good grasp of is the material side of being a parent. You know, it's expensive to go to college, and you know, we want to be able to provide for a child if they're a child, but there's also emotional aspects to it, and I know we've discussed somewhat of this, is that if a person, a child, is looking for a father figure, or at least to understand sort of who they are by getting to build that relationship, that's an aspect of parenting that you'll have to weigh for yourself if that's something you'd like to be a part of. And there's, of course, being a parent is very complicated. There's lots, but it can be fulfilling too.
Mm-hmm.
So just being a man who's concerned with family values, just weigh the costs and benefits accordingly. Now, this is probably the keystone of the entire case here, is the DNA test. That's really the only conclusive way we'll be able to determine whether Mr. Beck is in fact your child.
Okay.
Now, I want to tell you right now, the prospect of that information, if we get the test remaining confidential, is extremely high. Okay. My personal estimate would be about 95% that it'll remain confidential, and there are some ways that we can mitigate risk. Not entirely, nothing's ever for sure, but we can extremely mitigate the consequences. Now, the precautions that I've done in my research in terms of what we can do is one, taking the test to another state. I think conducting the lab research here in Nebraska would be much riskier than, say, going to Massachusetts, because on average, the random Massachusetts lab technician isn't going to know who the congressman from Nebraska is. So it's that it goes a long way.
Especially Nebraska.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, Nebraska's a fine state. You know, we're both citizens here, so
it's all right. I'm allowed to say that.
But I've also taken a look at the confidentiality statement of the lab that I was looking at. So the lab's actually run by Harvard Medical Center in conjunction with Mass General, and their confidentiality statement's pretty good. Very strict, no third-party disclosures. What I can do as well, if we decide to use this lab or another one like it, is approach with sort of addendum to sort of ask for increased damages, or just find ways to even shore up the confidentiality more to incentivize them taking the initiative to make sure this remains secret.
Okay.
And again, for me to contact them and to begin this process, at the end of this discussion, we'll have to make a decision about if this is something you'd be willing and or interested in doing. Now, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, any contact between that research laboratory and ourselves will remain between us and the lab. I can have them contact me on my cell phone alone, fax to my office and my secretary, who's well aware of my confidentiality and is well trained, or we can have only encrypted email. And if they can't do encrypted email, then we'll demand that they just contact either you or myself. And we can discuss that when we've made that decision. So this is actually the turn in the discussion where I need to know a little bit more about you, and I also about your politics, your career, and also sort of where you see yourself going if certain things happen in this case. I think first and foremost, I want to say that I'm sort of ambiguous. I don't understand family values entirely. I understand that it means, I imagine the nuclear family unit, just traditionally mother, father, but what other things sort of fall into what you would consider family values?
I guess it's just unity within the family, taking care of each other, making sure you have what each other needs, so you're not leaving each other out in the cold.
Great. And those values are something that I think appeal to many people. And I can imagine
it's universal. That's why.
Exactly. And I want to really try to help convey that no matter what happens, if forbid we don't want this to happen, disclosures made to the public somehow, or someone finds out. I think the ideas that you articulate in terms of family values can be turned, can be framed, and perspective can be given. Stepping up to be a parent, stepping up to provide for a child, that's
you think it might outbalance the adoption in the first place?
Yeah, I think the fact that you were young at the time, you're just out of college, you were monumentally stressed from really completing a very difficult degree program, to rise up now and say, I'm going to become a father, I'm going to contribute, that's something that can appeal to the constituency. And you're no stranger to spin and being able to put things in perspective. So don't, just being an experienced politician as yourself, weigh the idea of what can I do in my role to mitigate the consequences of this happening, and how can I frame this to my advantage. regardless of what happens. Now, that being said, I also want to talk about the idea of being candid with Aunt Emily. Mm-hmm. As I said, she seems to be somewhat open. She seems to have a fair amount of interest in you. Have you considered what would happen if you just told her about this? Have you thought about how she might receive it?
I think she might not be as forgiving as you think the public might be in regards to, because she always believed I had those values even back then when I put back up for adoption. So to say I didn't always have, or she might view it as I never had these values and I deceived her in some way. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, no, and I can understand it's a sensitive topic. Mm-hmm. But there's a possibility that it could, again, with full disclosure, just in my mind, I'm thinking, if you do tell her now, the same fallout is if she found out from someone else, except possibly it would be less. Be worse. Yeah, it would be worse if it comes from someone else. Exactly. But I think the aspect that you articulated about your career last time you were here, that was just, I took some time to think about it, and you were saying that you were concerned that you might end up sweeping floors or working at our cash register.
Well, I'm not really qualified to do much else but politics.
But, no, see, I think you're underestimating the skill set that politicians bring to the table. You say, all I know is how to legislate and how to get votes. No one knows how to do that, and if you do, there are people who are willing to pay to do so. So, in the event that you ever were no longer a congressman or you no longer wanted to do so, an avenue to consider is becoming a lobbyist. Now, in being a lobbyist, you have the virtue of picking who you want to lobby for. Obviously, there are a lot of influences in Washington. You've been on the receiving end of some of those messages, but I wanted to go over some of the income that you can make as a lobbyist that people generally make as representatives, and just say that no matter what happens in this case, you're in a good spot, and I wouldn't really worry about money. You have a number of assets available to you, and career opportunities aplenty. So let's talk about number one. I want to talk about your pension. So as a congressman, you've been in Congress for nearly a decade, and that's a substantial amount of time, and you will be earning a pension when you leave the legislature. Now, on average, congressional pensions range between low 40s to high 50s, but for about 10 years, you would probably be somewhere in the 40s range, which is $40,000 a year. You could definitely live off that. I know it would be less than what you're currently making, which on average, congressmen make about $150,000 to $170,000. Yeah. So the pension would almost completely cover the fallout if, for whatever reason, the trust income of $50,000 a year fell out. So that's good. You'll have a cover in either direction, no matter what happens. Now, the pension issue, just to bring this up, I say you have about a 99% chance of getting the pension. I only say 1% is because occasionally it does come up that the idea of congressman getting a pension can be politically unpopular. That being said, it's never gained traction. No one wants to take away from experienced politicians their right to have a retirement too. But it's something to consider. But I'd like to talk a little bit more about lobbying. Now, I think from my research, the probability that you'd be able to get an extremely high-paying lobbying job is probably in the high 80s. It's really common, and you have a really good track record. Of course, the rest of the 15%, we'll say, of whether you'll get the job or not getting the job is just chance. And depending on what the field's available now, what issues are interested in, what companies need. But there's always a need for lobbyists, so I wouldn't be concerned about that. But I want to talk a little bit about some examples I found. So actually, another congressman, a senator actually from Nebraska, Mr. Ben Nelson, he makes nearly $1 million a year as a lobbyist for the National Association of Insurance. Okay. Your name carries tons of weight in the insurance field because of Aunt Emily. Mm-hmm. Omaha Insurance is a big company.
Yes, it is.
And being able to walk into Washington and say, listen, I come from a family that has always respected the insurance company. Mm-hmm. We have a stake in it. I personally have a stake in it. It's very important to me, and I'm willing to lobby on these issues. That puts you in a great position. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of organizations that you'd be able to reach out to with those sort of connections. So $1 million a year that's what, 7 times as much as you make now as a congressman. A couple other examples that my research turned up. Is there anything?
Nope. By all means.
Billy Townsend, Steve Largent, 2 congressmen, 2.1 million and 1.5 million respectively. So there's a lot of money to be made, and you have the skill set for it. You know people. You've been in Washington for a long time. So the other option that I brought up, I have no idea if this is interesting to you, but it's a possibility. Do you ever think about going and getting a PhD in political science? I know you have your graduate degree, and with your history as a politician, there isn't a school in the country that wouldn't want you. I'd say probably about 90 to 95% chance that you could get in nearly any university you want to, 1, get your degree, and 2, work for them upon finishing it. So do you have any interest in going back to school?
Not really.
Okay.
If it somehow meant me continuing being able to work in legislature, I would be more open to it, but not as a fallback.
Yeah. I can tell you now that I am familiar with a couple programs at Georgetown and George Washington where you can take night classes, and they're specifically meant for individuals such as yourself who are kind of high profile and just congressmen, executive branch officials who they have to work constantly during the day, and the only time they can work, it'd take a while, but it's an option that's there on the table if ever you did consider that. But I also want to ask, have you considered, if you weren't a congressman, what would you want to do? Is there anything else you want to do than work on legislation?
I don't think there's anything else I can do with enjoying it, because lobbying is great. There's just, you're at the mercy of others, but that's what's so nice about being a congressman is you have more control over what is lobbied.
Got it. Definitely.
You can use that word there.
Yeah, no, it works. It's functional. And like you said, just got to be straightforward and get it done. Yep. So we make up our own verbs. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to move into what I consider the not the crux of the matter, but it's the other really significant part of this other than the family, which is the inheritance. So I want to get this out right now. The will is completely amendable. She can change the will if she chooses to. But again, you've been her sole heir for a long time, and it's just something to consider. Is that I imagine that decision was not made lightly. You have an extended family, and it's a substantial amount of money. Now, I need to ask a lot about the trust. So, did you bring any of the trust documents with you today?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
but
so
I'll get them faxed over here
perfect.
As soon as I can.
So there's 2 I'm interested in. One, I'm actually interested in the trust document, the document that sort of sets up what we call an inter vivos trust. So basically, you're alive, she's alive.
Vivos trust.
Phenomenal that you wrote that down.
Yes.
So that will just tell us a little bit more about how the trust is structured. So in Nebraska, they're what's called a reformed UTC state. Now, that's just jargon for they've changed the rules to be a bit more modern. And the traditional older rule said, inter vivos trust, you can't change it, leave it alone.
Okay.
Nebraska doesn't have that anymore. They can amend it. There's 3 ways they can do so. By will, so she can just change her will. Again, as we said, it's simple to do. What she can do is she can put a codicil on the trust, which just amends it. A codicil is just fancy word for addition.
Okay.
And then finally, she can get an agent to change it for her. So somebody under her authority that she gives permission to change things for her. So power of attorney. But this is why the trust document is so important, because the trust document can change everything. The trust document can say, no, you can't change this unless you get the permission of the trust state, the trustee, which is the person who overwatches everything. Unless you get the permission of the beneficiaries. This trust is irrevocable, can't change it at all. And if it says that, then that's completely off the table, and you will get what the entirety of that money, or what we call the res, the body of that trust, when your Aunt Emily passes. So if we can get that concern off the table, just on, we know it's going to be yours regardless, that would be really great.
Okay.
And, considering you'd get the pension and you'd have the trust in that situation, that'd be $100,000 every year, hands off, you don't do a thing, which would be great.
Avoid the custodial career.
Yeah. Man, just don't worry about the custodial career. You're highly intelligent, extremely articulate. There's plenty of places for you.
Okay.
And you're still a congressman. Don't forget that.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So no worries. But the other thing we need is the annual report. So every year, sometimes quarterly, the trust will make a disclosure to you about the balance of the money and the assets inside the account. And if for whatever reason, there's no indication to say so, but just to consider, if there's nothing in the account anymore, or it's getting down to it, like maybe there's only $200,000 left in there, then that kind of changes the consideration of how important the trust is.
Okay.
And if we can take that concern off the table, then that's something we don't have to worry about. It was going to end anyway. But okay, I think that covers the substantial issues. So now we're going to return to the ranking system.
Okay.
Let's go through these one more time. Secrecy of child's existence, new and Beck's relation, maintaining your inheritance, being a parent, continuing politics, you making a substantial income. Is there anything else you'd like to add at this time?
Yeah, you know what? I'll just do a college payment.
Okay, great.
Just so we can consider that too.
All right, so just in my experience when it comes to ranking these things, go with your gut. I think the more it's sort of you don't follow your own intuition, the tougher it is to feel about a decision. So
I just want to make sure it's still recording.
I know.
It's not, so I'm just gonna press record again.
Okay.
Okay.
So why don't we just dive into it?
Well, it comes real. The top three.
Okay.
Are those three.
Got it. Good to go.
But it's mostly this one that controls these two.
Okay. Good to go.
Because if the secret breaks, I could lose the trust. I could lose my career. So these ones are sort of dependent on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, then I guess the knowing
Okay.
if we are in fact related is
Got it.
comes up next.
Okay, so let's see. Secrecy of child's existence. Politics.
These two are kind of paired.
Okay.
Being a parent and paying for college, that seems to. Yeah. Okay.
So I think there's one thing that I can already tell is pretty clear from this setup. So obviously these each build on each other.
Yes.
Here, these three concerns are instantly resolved in terms of whether we know we're going to pursue them or not, if we know that Beck's your child.
Yes.
So that's pretty clear here. Continuing in politics is very important to you. So that means that secrecy is very important. So all the precautions we talked about, if you decide to get the test, are very important. If you decide not to, then just consider that this sort of gets brought into doubt about whether you want to be a parent, whether you should pay for college. There isn't really another great way to find out if you actually are the parent. But
Okay.
Remember, I would add in terms of course of action, the other option you have is you can go to the state of Illinois and you can start a court action for a confidential intermediary. But the problem with that is I think that would make it tougher to maintain secrecy because you have to go to the court.
And would that, me approaching the court, would that stay confidential in regards to everyone, or just them reaching out to the child?
You're reaching out to the child, so they wouldn't be able to tell who the child is, but the fact that you're looking for that would seem to indicate. So, so let's go through some of the options that can help attain these goals. We're going to start from the beginning just one more time. So right now it sounds like the confidential intermediary is probably off the table because secrecy is the most important. Okay. Okay. Okay, so knowing that you can make a substantial income even if you weren't a congressman, does that assuage the maintaining of inheritance? If you could make, right now we know that the pension is yours and that there's about an 85 to 90% chance of being able to get a high paying lobbying job. How do you feel about trying to, say, work on figuring out the child to resolve whether you should even be concerned about these issues, and be okay with losing the inheritance? Just from a monetary point of view.
The hypothetical of lobbying is, I mean, yes, I have the requisites to be hired, but it's still a hypothetical.
Of course, yeah.
This is
definite.
Yes, it's definite. I know I'm getting that.
And just weigh that against the risk of disclosure just by happenstance. So for now, back as far as we know, and if this isn't still true, he hasn't asked for money, but he does seem to want to contact you. It's tough telling what that could grow into in terms of sort of if he continually becomes a presence in your life. It's tough to tell right now what the chances are that that would just become public anyway. So we'll focus on trying to maintain inheritance, but continuing the politics is still the most important.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yes.
No, that's okay. So, how do you feel about the parenting test? I think, or let me ask, how would you feel about not knowing if Beck's your child, but still considering whether, still being a parent and in college?
Without knowing whether he is in fact my child, I don't feel comfortable throwing away that.
Got it.
I mean, for all I know, I'm getting scammed, or if in that world I'm getting scammed, I don't want to pay for the scam artist's college.
Exactly.
Not that I think that, because he does seem genuine, but
and
just things you have to consider.
Having some of the facts corroborated makes us feel a little bit better about this. But how do you feel about getting the parenting test at this point? Given
it sounds like they're pretty good at being confidential. So I mean, if they can't do encrypted email like you said, and then they can fall back and contacting. I'd prefer you just in case.
Okay, sure.
I'm not alone or anything like that.
So I meant to. So thank you for bringing that up. And I would have gotten to it at the end because I made sure to make a note because it's very important. I would have emphasized for contacting me instead of you because, in my experience, multiple times, information gets left on phones and someone listens to a message thinking like, oh, I'll do them a favor, I'll listen and let them know, and they hear something they shouldn't.
Because a lot of the times when my as I get executive assistants reading back my messages, she puts them on little pieces of paper. I just don't. It's just,
hey boss, you're
exactly. And then I'm reading them in. Sometimes I don't. I read them out loud. I'm not even thinking about it. All of a sudden I see like, oh, you are the father. This
isn't
cat's out of the bag.
It's not Jerry Springer more. We don't want someone
exactly.
You are the father. So, okay, I think that's good that we've settled that. Okay. For continuing politics, this is something that you're going to be able to weigh better than I can. Is what are the possibilities for framing disclosure about having a son? Like, how well do you think you can turn that to a positive given your values
if
of
I
unity
can
and needs covered?
Turn it, I have to be the one that comes out with it. Because if it comes out, then I'm not telling the story, and then it seems like I've been trying to hide it.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're well aware of a number of kind of controversies that have come up in Washington recently.
And then whenever people admit to it afterward, it never seems genuine at that point. You didn't have a choice.
So there's something to be said for being proactive.
There is.
And that's a decision you don't have to make today because we don't have the results. So that can wait until another meeting between us and until after we get the results.
Preferably, if I had to choose though, I'd prefer to keep it a secret.
Okay.
Because there's still that risk of disclosing it. People don't forgive.
Okay.
there's just that stigma that comes with my name is he's the guy who abandoned his kids. So I just would prefer it's Beck stays a secret regardless.
Okay.
Parentage.
And that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're well established on the legal consequences relating to if Beck is your child or not, and if he's not, then that's going to help sort of alleviate the more of the risk about people finding out.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, now you don't have to decide what to do with that information. The point is that we'll get you the information.
Okay.
So that's good. So I think that makes it clear on the course of action. Again, just to cover it, we're gonna try to get that test done.
Mm-hmm.
We'll use a secure lab. You'll get us the trust document and the quarterly or annual report on the finances. And for now, non-disclosure of the information to all parties. Now, I think the only other thing that I'd want to talk about today is a discussion about fees.
Okay.
Right now, you're fine. You gave us a substantial retainer at the beginning of our legal relationship, and there's still 60% of it left. So I've used about $1,800 so far. So there's at least another 2 to 3 weeks in there.
Okay.
But I want to make you aware you'll be constantly kept up to date in terms of what I've done for work and what I'll be doing for work from this point on.
So at that point, you'll just keep me
posted
on how much time we have left.
Exactly. So the only other thing I can say, Congressman, is keep me updated on anything that happens between you and Beck. If the other parent contacts you, any further sort of considerations that weigh into your mind about what's the likelihood of this becoming public.
Okay.
Right now, our course of action doesn't really change too much in terms of the chances of that coming out. But as time goes on, it's still going to be there. And if you are a parent, you may find it difficult to fill the role and still keep this a secret, and maybe not. But we can continue that discussion another day, and that's just something to consider. But I'm glad we have a plan of action here in terms of how we'll address this.
Me too.
So, Congressman, thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much, sir.
Have a good one.
Same to you. So I wonder if there's